Welcome back. We're joined by Gene Munster, who covers Apple for Piper Jaffray. Gene, it's the beginning of the year. We have about 5 or 6 months left until it's iPhone season again. And the first kind of rumors are starting to come out. Today I saw something about the next phone having multi-touch covering like the new Apple mouse has, and I'm sure over the next few months we're going to hear a lot of this stuff. But to me, the more interesting story, at least on the business side, is going to be distribution, especially in the U.S. What do you think? Is AT&T's exclusive done here? Is Verizon going to be a 2010 story, or is that still coming in the future?
Well, we think Verizon is going to be selling the iPhone by the end of 2010, and ultimately I think everyone's pretty mixed on this, and the reason why we believe that they're going to be selling is it just makes sense for them to do it. And I realize that there's been a lot of, in the advertising, some of the advertising that Verizon's done hasn't been quite appealing to Apple. But at the end of the day, Verizon wants to win, and they're going to need the iPhone, the best phone, the nuclear weapon, if you will, in the mobile phone space in order to compete. So we think you will, Verizon users, you will get the phone, and we think that's going to be likely in the September quarter.
I mean, I got to agree with you. I say AT&T did a very nice job at the initial launch, but just not only the way the network is performed, but also there's just a certain number of people who are not going to leave Verizon. They're the biggest carrier. It just simply makes too much sense for them to discontinue the exclusive relationship. And do you think the subsidy will be affected at all, or will Apple still get the same subsidy from Verizon and AT&T once they're able to sell on multiple carriers in the U.S.?
Apple said on their conference call that in a multi-carrier environment, which would be the case if Verizon came on board, that the subsidy would effectively stay the same, or their price would stay the same. So I don't think you should start to see many differences in the pricing. They may have a free version, take the existing $100 version, move that to free. But I think at the really core of this, if you look at the biggest reason why people in the United States don't buy an iPhone, it's because it's on AT&T. And there's just a lot of Verizon users who would love this phone. And so Apple understands that, and I think they're doing everything in the power to work with Verizon to make this a reality.
Great. In the last couple months, especially, Google Android has gotten a lot of attention. I know you also cover Google, and do you think that the current stable of Android devices are any threat to Apple, or is it more along the lines of when Motorola and LG and Samsung and all those guys are making the cheap, throwaway $50 to $100 devices, or even free devices on Android, where then they can really flood the market, not just smartphones, the high-end stuff where Apple's playing, but also the kind of mid-range feature phones? Will that be a threat to Apple as well?
There's no question the mobile market has gotten more competitive in the last 3 months, and the Nexus One's the best example of a phone that comes close to the iPhone, but it's still not the iPhone. The risk to Apple isn't one device actually captures the imagination of the public and starts winning share. It's the death by 1,000 cuts.
Sure.
A year ago it was the Palm Pre, it was the Storm, the Palm Pre, the Droid, the Nexus One. Every month you're going to have some phone that's going to be proclaimed to be an iPhone killer, and that's going to hold off some people from actually buying an iPhone. So we saw the same phenomenon back in 2004 to 2006 with the iPod as more devices started to hit the market. At the end of the day, none of them can offer the same ubiquitous experience where you can move content around through iTunes into your phone that Apple can offer, and that's a big competitive advantage.
So 3 billion apps downloaded, huge story. I own an iPhone, I use apps all the time. Do you think these are apps that will keep people on the platform? Is there a lock-in factor? I've spent several $100s on apps. Most people I know have not, obviously. Do you think this is something that would keep someone from, after their iPhone contract is up, from leaving Apple for another device or carrier, or are these apps kind of inconsequential, and while it's a nice story, they're not really locking anyone into the platform?
No, they are locking things. People do change their apps frequently, but just the ease of use that they can use the apps. One thing interesting is we go and survey people and ask them what kind of cell phones that they have, who their manufacturer is. Only half the people actually know who their manufacturer is. A lot of times they think it's their carrier as their manufacturer. But people who have iPhones know it's an iPhone, and this is the first time there's ever been real brand loyalty in the mobile space. So I think it's a combination of the brand loyalty, which is driven by the apps, will keep people back and buying future iPhones.
Great. And in terms of last year's updates to the iPhone, the 3GS was kind of a minor update in terms of features. The pricing and the value were definitely added, but the features that Apple added were not very significant. Do you think this year's crop is going to be one where they do kind of make a stronger leap, or is this going to be another year where they say, okay, here's this year's iPhone, maybe it has a little more memory, maybe a slightly better camera, and it's on more carriers?
They'll do that, and they'll take the existing phone, as we talked about, and move that down. But don't forget that Apple's talked about a strategy of having a differentiated market. They're trying to do that with the 3G and 3GS, but there's still an opportunity that, for example, a nano phone comes out. We don't know that that's the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year and a half that you're going to see just a different form factor iPhone that really segments the market.
And I know you don't focus on the wireless carrier market at all, but in terms of your analysis of how the iPhone will continue selling, to this point, Apple has made their carrier partners be very simple with the service offerings. You know, flat fee, all-you-can-eat data plan. At first, it was even simpler with only one bucket available for text message and things. But AT&T has recently made noise that they're going to try to get more value out of, or more revenue out of some of those high data users. 4G, as it comes along, may be a situation where it's not all-you-can-eat data anymore, but they start to charge by the pound or whatever, by how much internet access you use. Would that ever impact sales for something like an iPhone, which is a data-heavy phone, or do you think that people are getting to the point where they're addicted to this thing, they're going to pay as much as they need to for it?
Well, the existing iPhone owners, I don't think that's going to impact that. I think that they're willing, they have more disposable income, they're willing to pay on a tiered price. I think it would frustrate people, but they pay for minutes on a tiered package, so I don't see that being that big of an issue. I think as you go mainstream, ultimately the iPhone data pack plans and all-in plans need to get more in line with the rest of the industry for this really to take off, and we think that will happen. But that's going to be a challenge, I think, is for kind of the real sweet spot of the market. $110 monthly bill is just too much for them, and that needs to come down.
Great. And this quarter, 8-point-something million phones you think they'll move? Yep,
8.8, which is up about a little over 100% year over year.
And that's almost the 10 million they thought they would sell in the first year, which they beat, obviously. In another year from now, where we have more carriers in the U.S. selling the iPhone, where it's available in everywhere in Asia that's possible, how many do you think they could be moving a quarter by then?
Well, we have for next year 45 million, which is it averages to be a little bit over 11 million per quarter. But I think if you kind of fast forward even beyond then, that you can still see continued 30% growth. So you can just kind of run the numbers, but it's safe to say is that this is still an early market. Over 1.2 billion phones sold a year, 45 million in that context is not a lot of phones.
Great. Thanks, Gene.
Thank you.